The Active Observers tab, what I'll do is I'll just start demonstrating and then we'll come back to all the settings fairly shortly. So in Add-ons, Multi-Tool Prepared, you'll find Open Active Observer. If you click on that, you'll get a top-down view and an observer camera. You can have two observer cameras, so if you click on it again, you'll get the second one. So if we zoom out on the top-down view, just see a little bit more of the surroundings. So what we can do is we can place these observer cameras anywhere on using the top-down view. So what we do is there's two ways of working this. We can either use tab and left mouse click. So what I'll do is I'll tab left mouse click to select that one, and then I'll position it and tab left mouse click on the top down view and position that. And we can do the same for this one, the next one. So I'll put that over here. Now the altitude it's set those at is governed by some settings here. So currently it's setting at 50 foot above ground level. If we want to put that right on the ground, we'll reposition this one. So you can see like that. So the other settings we've got here is both of these observers has a threshold distance. Within that threshold distance from your aircraft, it will use these close-up settings, and so this is close-up, it's a fixed field of view, so I can make it a narrow field of view like that, or I can make it a very wide field of view like that if I really want to. So basically when you're very close to the aircraft, sort of set that to a feasible setting that you like, and then you can leave it. Now beyond that distance it will be governed by these far distance settings here. So what I can actually do is I'll place one of the cameras outside of that threshold just so we can sort of see how that works. So I'll put it above the ground a bit just so we can see a bit better, and I'll place this one out about, let's say, here. You still see the aircraft, which you might not expect to see there. Now the reason for that is this slider here basically determines how much of that view the aircraft takes up. Right, so I can make it take up all of the view, half of the view, a third of the view, etc. And the tick box, the locked constant size, what that will do, if that is ticked as the aircraft moves closer or further away, you'd expect it to get bigger or smaller. But if the locked constant size is ticked, what it'll do is it'll keep on adjusting the field of view to maintain that size of the aircraft within the view. If it's not ticked, then the field of view will stay fixed and the aircraft will get bigger or smaller depending whether you're getting further or closer. So the intention of this is to have a setting so when the aircraft's a long distance away, like 4 or 5 kilometres, so you're not just looking at a dot, you are actually zoomed in, can see what's happening, and when you get to 1 or 2 kilometres away from the camera, which you might have positioned for landing or something, then it'll start as a little aircraft and get bigger and bigger using the fixed field of view in this setting. The camera altitude settings, so you can set your camera at the ground level plus an offset, or you can set it at the aircraft altitude. So if this aircraft's airborne, I can set it at the same altitude, or I can set it a bit above or a bit below using that slider. The hold last altitude, if you've set to a specific altitude and you want more clicks on the top down view to stay at that altitude rather than adjust to the new aircraft altitude, then just click on that and it'll hold it at whatever that setting was. So the other things we can do with these cameras is the action on click. So at the moment it is clicking on this top-down view is positioning the observer, and it's always tracking the aircraft. So I'll just zoom back in here a little bit. Go into that one, and whoops, let's select this one again. So we're always looking at that aircraft. I'll just adjust these settings so we have a smaller field of view and we can actually see it. And that's obviously dropping away there. I might just have to lift that camera a little bit. Let's go to ground level. Right, so you can see how that's tracking the aircraft wherever I put the camera. You can also position it without tracking the aircraft. So the camera is just going to stay locked to where it's pointing at the moment, but the position is going to move. So I'm facing sort of northwest there, and I'm just moving my position. The numeric keys, once it's unlocked from the aircraft, they will pan. The panning is a little bit slow, but it does pan. But the other thing we can do here is the third option there is, so you can position the observer where you want. So let's say we're going to put him here. And then you can do a second click to position where you want him to look. So I'm going to look over at the buildings here. So it's pretty flexible for moving your observers and determining where they look. Now when you're in that non-tracking mode, it uses the field of view you've got defined here. So you can set how wide or small that field is. And if you click back on here, it's going to turn back onto the aircraft. The other method of, rather than using tab and click, you might have tab click assigned to something else. If you right hand click and activate your mouse yoke. Now if you probably need to pause when you're doing this, because the mouse yoke is the same as using your control column, but mouse yoke clicking will select these views and move them. The same, you don't need the tab key when you're doing this. So what I'll do now is I'll just do that demo of how those fields of view work. So we'll position one camera right in front of the aircraft. And we'll position the second camera down the far end of the runway. So we can, and we'll set this to 500 meters. We'll set them both to 500 meters. So the one above me is locked at a 20-degree field of view, and the one to the left here is going to hold a constant size until we're halfway down the runway, and then it'll flick into the 20-degree field of view. So let's head off down the runway and have a look at that. So we could see on this one it's not increasing size basically because that field of view was locked. Sorry, the size was locked. It's adjusting the field of view to keep that size. Shortly it'll move into that second mode that was within the 500 meters. So it's this one. Shortly it's going to flick into here, and then it'll change to a different. Okay, so you see it changed over there, and it's now using a fixed field of view. And in a second it'll move back into that more than 500 meters away, and it'll zoom back in on the aircraft again like that. Now we can see the field of view changing here as we get further away to maintain that size. If I turn that off, it stays locked, and we'll see this. Whoops, I think I must still have my mouse yoke on. So this aircraft here is going to be getting smaller because that field of view is locked. This one's staying the same size because it's adjusting the field of view to narrower. One other thing I should mention is the calibration of this top-down view for converting position to real-world coordinates. It's reasonably accurate between 24 and 128 zoom levels. Outside of that, it starts to get a reasonable amount of error, and it's something I work on to improve, but at the moment probably stick within those zoom levels for accuracy. So that's your 24 zoom, that's as far as you want to go out. If you go out further you'll start to get some pretty big errors, and 128 is in pretty close. You probably don't need to be in that close, but it's still pretty accurate at that level. The observer views can be resized. They'll take a second before the aspect updates, but yep, that'll update. Once you've got your observer views set up, you don't need the top-down view anymore. You can close that. 3 ways you can close that: through the view menu using the close view, right-hand clicking and going close window, and you can also use the square bracket key if you haven't changed that mapping. That closes that. If you want to bring that back up, all you do is you just go back to the menu item here. Now, although you can change the size of the observer views, do not change the size of the top-down view, because the calibration for working out distances is based on the size it opens up at. If you change the dimensions, you're going to start getting placements in different spots to where you actually clicked. The observer views, you can also undock them, and you should be able to move them to other monitors. So the positioning should still work even when that's undocked. I'll just check it. Yep, so that's working fine.